Okay, hello everybody. My name is Alex Gonzalez, and I am one of the two Adobe evangelists here at the University of Arizona. Brian is here as well. He is manning the chat. He put this website in front of all our screens, hopefully. Actually, I saw, yeah, I did. Sorry. Can everybody see my screen okay? Okay, thank you. It doesn't have the green box. So this is a resource page where we will post the recording of this workshop if you'd like to revisit it. And there's some helpful resources and reminders here as well on how to use the tools and what keyboard shortcuts are. So the only thing we're using this page for today is to get to the workshop assets, which takes you to a link like this. And it's, I believe, 21 files. And if you just download them all at once, that'll help you follow along if you like to. You can also follow along with your own photographs, which I highly encourage, but I thought some things you might like to try the same way. And today's topic is using Lightroom Classic to create a photography workflow, which is the idea of bringing your pictures in, selecting which pictures you'd like to edit, editing them, and exporting them out in a finished format. So show of emojis, has anybody used Lightroom before here? Maybe Lightroom mobile. Oh, nice, hand, excellent. All right, awesome. And does anybody also edit pictures in any other app? You can put it in the chat or unmute if you like. I will say that our workshop format, we have an agenda, but we're very flexible. We like to hear your ideas and we love to hear your questions. So please chime in anytime. Snapseed, that's great. So I am going to start by talking about what Lightroom is. And you might notice in the past few years, a lot of the image editing tools have become very similar. Even on your iPhone, when you edit with the Photos app, a lot of the sliders and options will work very similarly, but they tend to work a little nicer in Lightroom. It's a little more robust. So what Lightroom is, I'll just put it here. It's not just a photo editing program. There's a lot of those out there. You can open a picture, crop it, change the contrast, rotate, make the colors pretty. But it's also a image management program where it helps you create a catalog where you can easily keep track of your pictures. And it also is an incredible time saver if you're working with a lot of photographs. And probably the most important, well, not most important, but a very important aspect of Lightroom is that it treats your photographs like negatives. It edits them non-destructively. So let's go ahead and open Lightroom. The first time you open Lightroom, if you haven't, it'll ask if you would like to just start with the default catalog, which is fine. I'm going to go ahead and make a new catalog, and a catalog describes the photographs that you have made Lightroom pay attention to. And you can have as many catalogs as you like. So for example, if I get hired to photograph somebody's wedding, I give them their own catalog. That way I can very easily keep clients and commissions apart, and I can find them whenever I like. So, but you should start with the defaults.
I have a question.
Go for it.
So how do you start a new catalog? I've got Lightroom open and I've got other photos in there.
Oh, what a great question. Yeah, if you want to just do it fresh, you go File, New Catalog.
It's not.
Okay. Oh, I have a very, very important clarifying point. We are working in Lightroom Classic today. We're not working in Lightroom CC. So
okay. I'm in Lightroom CC, I guess.
Yeah, so go ahead and open up Lightroom Classic. Lightroom CC is the cloud-based version of Lightroom. It does not support different catalogs, and it does not do a lot of the things that we're going to show you in Lightroom Classic today that have to do with file management. Lightroom CC, which I'm just opening up so that we see the difference, is an application that makes it super easy to edit across devices. So you can open up Lightroom on your iPhone and see the same catalog as you would see on your desktop or your iPad or another computer.
So how do I open up Lightroom CC or Lightroom
You want Classic. So
Classic? That's what so if I close this,
if you open up your Creative Cloud app, and you might install it while we start the demo, you can search for Lightroom, and you want to choose Lightroom Classic here. And you should have the option to install if you don't have it yet, or to open it if you already have it.
all right, so if I go on my start button and I've got,
So go ahead and search. I know I'm on a Mac.
do I go Adobe Creative Cloud or?
Yes. Open up the Creative Cloud, Adobe Creative Cloud app, and it will look like this.
Hold on, it'll look like.
Is everyone else in Lightroom Classic?
Lightroom Classic. Okay, install. That was a good point. Thank you.
Excellent. Sounds like we are good.
I'm installing.
Okay, so you'll play a little bit of catch up, but it'll be okay. So let me go ahead and start with a fresh catalog so we're all seeing the same here. Demo 10, 19, 21. I'm going to just have it go in my pictures folder. Your file management is up to you, but it is extremely important to know where your files are, especially with the way Lightroom manages them. So here's Lightroom. And today we're going to live in two of the modules or workspaces. We're going to use the library to bring images in, browse them, and select the ones that we want to edit. And then we're going to use develop to edit them, to make them look like finished images. And what Lightroom is modeled after, maybe some of you will relate here, is to when we used to use the darkroom to enlarge our images. Did anybody ever print from negatives?
Yep.
Good. So if you recall, and if you don't recall, just imagine, you would have your light table and you would review your negatives. And then you would choose which ones you wanted to develop or enlarge. And when you enlarge them, you were making a copy of the negative with the original negative never being altered. And that's what happens with Lightroom as well. So this library space, on the left-hand side will be our navigation. We can navigate through the actual folders on our computer. We can make collections, and we can even send it to some of our online services if we like. We probably won't get there today. The center space is our viewing space where we can see one image, zoom in, or we can see them as a grid. And then the right-hand side will be kind of what we call the metadata, where you can see the exposure information. You can tag it. If it has GPS data, it'll show you that as well. And you can also use it to add keywords, which is a really useful thing as you keep adding photographs if you have a keyword for a specific image. But there are several ways to make your images easy to find after importing. So let's go ahead and talk about importing now. So if we look at the lower left-hand side, we see it says import here. And this is how you open images in Lightroom. And what Lightroom does is it points to your files. It never, the pictures never live inside Lightroom. It's just saying they're here and I'm showing them to you. And this is a really important concept to piece together, because the number one mistake people make with Lightroom is import images and then move the files outside of Lightroom, and then they get a bunch of question marks. So let's talk about importing, and let's talk about that problem I discussed as well. So let's import. The import screen shows us where the files are coming from on the left-hand side and where they're going to on the right-hand side. The center is for reviewing and selecting. So my files, and probably yours as well, should be in your downloads folder. Hopefully you opened the zip file, and there's a folder called 10/19/21 Lightroom Classic Workflow. And there's all of our pictures. There's a very handsome boy there. That's my son. So to get to here, I know that I could navigate by going to select a source and other source, and that'll bring up your Explorer or Finder, depending on if you're in Windows or Mac. So I have my downloads folder. I have 10/19/21. And you just choose folders. So you don't choose specific images here yet. If you're like me, if you like to click and drag, you can also just click and drag a folder onto the center space, which I don't know, to me is a time saver, but so get to them however you like. You can also navigate through these, which to me is the slowest way. So we've chosen a folder that we're going to import from. They're not actually in Lightroom yet. They are already on the computer. So they're not coming off the camera, but if you plug the camera in, they'll show up as well. So if we look at the top here, we have 4 options. We have add, which says add photos to catalog without moving them. It's going to say, I know these pictures are in your downloads folder. It has move, where it will take them from where they are, my downloads folder, and put them somewhere new. And it has copy, where it will leave the originals and make copies of them somewhere new as well. Usually when you get them off a camera, you're copying them. If you've already put them in your computer where you want, you're adding them. And you also have copy as DNG, which actually changes the format of the picture. We are going to talk about formats if time allows, but this is a nice way if you start to shoot in RAW. If that doesn't mean anything to you yet, that's okay. This is a way to convert it to a RAW format that is a little more future-proof. But I'm going to move them, and I'm going to tell it to move them into my pictures folder, which is here. We can also, just like before, you could go other destination and just choose it through your Explorer or Finder. So I'll go to pictures and I will have them go into a new folder called demo files, demo pictures. And what I want you to consider when you're doing this is, how will you organize your pictures in general? If it's a lot of personal work, a lot of folks maybe separate them by genres or locations. Personally, if you look at my computer that I do my photography work on, I have a folder called Photos, and inside that Photos folder is a folder for each year, and inside each year is each shoot. So I have a folder that says Judah, that's my son, Pumpkin Patch, October, and that's how I can find those files recently. I did a head shoot last weekend for somebody named David R. So I put David R. headshot. And that's just my personal organization by year and by shoot. But as long as you have some system in place, you'll be great. But if you just have a folder called Sweet Pics where you throw all your pictures in there, it can get pretty hairy pretty quick. Maybe from my personal experience 10 years ago when I had 80,000 pictures in one folder, but not anymore. Okay, so I'm choosing this folder. So it's going to take them from my downloads. It's going to move them into pictures, into a folder called demo pictures. If you wanted to, at this point, you could uncheck pictures you know you don't want. I actually like to import them all and then do we call it culling, C-U-L-L-I-N-G. I like to cull in the library view. So let's click import. Any questions about importing so far?
I got a little lost, sorry. So I've got the Lightroom open.
Mhm.
And I've got the classic workflow, all the photos there.
Did you import them into Lightroom yet?
I've got Lightroom open, I've got
Okay.
the box open and they're showing up. Does that mean they're imported or they're just showing up from my box folder?
So did you click the download button on Box and get them onto your computer?
Yes. Well, yes, I put them in box, so maybe not.
So if you go to your Explorer on Windows in your downloads folder, you should see a file that's called 1019/21.
Yep.
Okay. And did you double click that zip file to get the folder?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to do this one more time real quick. Let me just delete these pictures. So you can delete pictures from Lightroom. It doesn't delete them from your computer, which is an important concept. So you have two options: remove from Lightroom, that will just take them off, or delete from disk, that will actually move them to my garbage can. So I'm in Lightroom, I'm in the library mode, and I'm going to click import and go to select a source, other source, and find that folder that you just unzipped. So for me, it's in my pictures folder already. Then you'll click choose, and you can have it set to add. It'll just add them to Lightroom from where they are. And we will click import. Okay, so now we are in our library. We have some images. For this actual personal memory, I actually had like 300 pictures that I haven't completely gone through. I just grabbed a few so we could talk about how you review and select your images. So in the grid, I'm sorry, in the library, you can see it in a grid view. You can double click on a picture to see it full size or fit to window. And you can click once on it to zoom in. Now, zooming in, I know that this is a picture that I do not want because it's out of focus, or it's just completely out of focus. Sometimes it's back or front focus, but this particular picture is not great. So, and I'm just clicking to zoom in and clicking to zoom back out. When you're zoomed in, your mouse becomes a hand that lets you click and pan around the image. So I can see his moccasins or his overalls or his scratches, which we'll remove later. So this picture I don't want. So I'm just going to go on to the next one, because what I like to do when selecting pictures is use the star rating system. Now, there's more than one way to label or tag or rate an image, but I like to use the stars. There are also flags, there are color labels, there are keywords, but you can see the stars here at the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But I prefer to just press 5 on the keyboard if I want to edit a picture, if I maybe want to edit a picture. So let's go to the next one. That's out of focus, I don't want it. Okay, that's pretty good. Let's zoom in. It looks pretty sharp. Looks like it focused more here than there, but that's okay. I'm going to keep it. I'm going to press 5 on the keyboard. And if you look, now these 5 stars are filled in. If you look under the thumbnail, there are 5 little stars. If I made a mistake, I can press 0 to remove stars. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all set that specific number of stars. So let's look through the rest. That's pretty cute. Maybe I'll edit it. I don't know. Like, what's he looking at? Let's keep going. Okay, so here I have 2 that are almost the same picture. Really very little difference. So I'm not going to give 5 stars to the next one. I'm just using my arrow keys to look through them. This is nice. I like that he's looking a little more toward the camera. I'll press 5, and that one's a little closer. So I'll press 5 again. And this is a review, so you kind of go quick the first time, and then you'll look through all your 5-star pictures and remove the ones that there are redundancies and better ones of. So we'll go again. Okay, 5 stars, 5 stars. There's people in both of these. I'm not going to use them. There we go, 5 stars. And you'll notice there's 2 of the same exact picture, but if you look at the file name, they end in different formats. So that'll be for demonstration later. All right, that's pretty fun. Not really. That's pretty good. And 5 stars. So I went through 21 pictures and I gave 5 stars to the ones that I maybe want to edit. And the purpose of doing that is so that I can separate the 5-star pictures and focus just on those. So let's say we want to do that. If you look on your left-hand side, you can see your file browser, my Macintosh hard drive. Yours will maybe say different things. If you're on Windows, it usually just says C. But underneath is collections and smart collections. If you open up your smart collections, you can see it already makes smart ones. It says, hey, these don't have keywords. These have been recently changed. These are from the past month. So if you keep adding, you can see your most recent in different ways. But if you see here, there's already a smart collection called 5 stars. If I click that, and I'm going to press G on my keyboard to go back to the grid view, or hit the grid view button here in the lower left of the center window. You can see I don't have 21 pictures anymore. I have 12 because those are the ones that I gave 5 stars to. On the bottom right, you can change the thumbnail preview size. And I could look through these, and then I could eliminate again. So I like that one, he's smiling. I don't really like that one. So now I'm going to press 0 on the keyboard, and that's going to make it disappear from my smart collection. If that was an accident, you can use my favorite keyboard shortcut, Command Z or Control Z on Windows, to undo that reading. So Lightroom keeps history of everything you've done, even from just going to the next picture. Do we have questions about culling pictures, about navigating and giving them 5 stars and going to your smart collection? Cool. If they come up, please do ask.
You can always go back though to all your pictures and add more to the smart grid.
Oh yeah. So let's say I wish I had gotten other ones. I can navigate back to my demo pictures folder, and I can see all 21 pictures again. And I can say, you know what, even though there's a person here, I wish I had given that 5 stars, and I can click on it and press 5 stars. And your Lightroom catalog is a living document. So as you keep importing, it will keep growing in size. And if you add new folders, you will end up with multiple folders on the left. So if I were to go to import and select these Easter pictures, those are going to be embarrassing. And I click import. I can't wait to show those to his girlfriend. And now I have demo pictures, and I have Judah Easter. Okay, so that's kind of the gist of using your library. I do want to show you one more thing that's important to know. Let's say I go into my Finder and I start messing with my photos. So the folder is called Demo Pictures. And I go to this very first one and I say 1Z7A25. That doesn't mean anything. So I actually want to name it Tractor 1. If I rename this file, watch what happens in Lightroom to that file. There's a little exclamation point here now. And that means this photo is missing. it's not missing, right? It just was renamed, and Lightroom doesn't know where it went because it says it lives in this user in their pictures folder in demo photos, demo pictures, and it's named 1ZA whatever. So you can't go and change your files outside of Lightroom once you've imported without having to go back and fix things. But you can rearrange and rename things inside of Lightroom if you wanted. So I said I would find the picture and I'm going to say, hey, well, that's called Tractor 1 now. And now it's saying, well, these have different names. We say, yeah, I changed it. Oops. And now it's no longer upset. But I can also make folders here where I could say, right click on demo pictures. I can rename the folder. I can show the folder above it if I want, but I can also create a folder inside this folder and I can name it. You don't need to do this because Lightroom already did it, but if for some reason you wanted to physically separate your 5-star photos, you have a folder called 5 stars. Then you could go here and let's get these ones out of here. You could select the 5-star pictures. So I clicked on the first one, held shift and clicked on the last one, and you could move them into the 5 stars folder. And this isn't something that happened only in Lightroom now. This is actually happening on our hard drive where a folder named 5 stars exists and it put those pictures in there. So what I'm kind of going on and on about is that import your files and manage them inside Lightroom at that point, unless you want to have some headaches along the way. Okay, we ready to check out the develop module? That's where we actually edit pictures. All right, let's go for it. So we're going to switch over to develop. And you can see there are several other workspaces or modules here. Well, we probably won't get there today, but there's some cool stuff in there too. So the develop module will still let you see your collections, but it replaces the file browser and all that with presets, snapshots, which are history states, the history of what you've done in the picture, and you can still see your collections. So right now it says no photos selected. So let's go ahead and select one. And now you see with this picture selected, my right-hand side is full of tools now, full of our image adjustments. And I'm going to talk about some of my favorite tools to use to adjust an image. I will say that the best thing you can do to get a great photograph is take a good photograph first, if that makes sense. Have nice strong lighting, have it be sharply focused, have your subject take up the majority of the frame, and then you want to come into Lightroom and just spice it up a little. Brian always talks about, I'm gonna butcher this, but it's kind of a salt and pepper thing. You add salt and pepper to make something better. You don't eat salt and pepper. And Brian, I'm sorry I ruined it, but that's what we're doing here. So I'll take it about right. We're going here and we're going to make adjustments, tweaks to make our picture feel a little more ours than just the cameras. So I'm going to start with my very first tool I always use. It's called the crop tool. I think a lot of us are familiar with it. If you look on the right-hand side, there's what looks like a grid with a dashed line around it. That's called the crop overlay. And I do love keyboard shortcuts. So if you see there, you press R on your keyboard, it will enter the crop mode. And yeah, thanks for that, Brian. Yeah. And the more the idea is just get it right from the beginning. And we can't, it's unfortunately not magic, although a lot of what we see here does feel like magic. So the crop tool is just how we cut out unwanted parts of an image and straighten it out. You don't want to go in and click and drag on a tiny part of your picture, because when you crop that much, you have taken something that was thousands of pixels and turned it into hundreds. So that's what I mean by having your subject fill the majority of the frame already. Command or Control Z. So the crop tool, to rotate, you move your mouse to the outside and you'll get this curved double-headed arrow, and that lets you rotate an image in whichever direction you like. You'll see that it confines the crop inside the image. If you're used to something like Photoshop, sometimes you can go outside of the canvas, but not in Lightroom, which is, I think, very nice. If you look here, when you click on the crop tool, you get these tools, these settings here. You can choose your aspect, which is what we call the ratio. You can choose as shot, so the original dimensions, the common ones, square, 4x5, 8.5 by 11. You can enter, like say I've got 13 by 19 inch piece of paper I want to print this on. I can put 13 by 19 and press OK. And it gives me a rectangle that is 13 by 19 inches. So as I resize it, it maintains those proportions. Or you can just click this little lock here, and you can just crop however you like. And I'm just moving the bars around. That's how you resize your crop overlay. And if you click on the picture, you move it inside of the crop that you are doing. I will show you one more tool here. That is the straighten tool. So every time we take a photograph, we're taking three-dimensional space and compressing it into two-dimensional space, which means it's entirely possible that there are several lines in our image that will not look straight when we straighten parts of an image. So if we look at this picture, this kind of barn behind us is slightly receding away. So I know that the roof line, as nice as it would be to have a straight horizon line, is not what's going to be straight in this picture. And that's 0 degrees or 90 degrees. But I might use the vertical ridges of the wall as my guide for straightening this picture. And I don't have to eyeball it. I can use this level here where it says angle. There's a straighten tool. You click on that, and what you do with this is you click and drag and follow the line in your picture that you want to be straight. So if I wanted the roof to be 0 degrees, I click at the starting point and follow the line of the roof and let go, and it straightens it to the roof edge, which isn't really what we want, right? So let's try again. I'll grab the straighten tool and I will click and drag and follow one of these vertical lines from the wall. And now I know it's about as straight as it can be without me going too wild on trying to do some lens corrections. So that's how you crop. Do we have any questions about the crop tool? And the nice thing is all these things we talk about are on that resource page. So don't feel like you have to write anything down or force yourself to remember. So the next section is this kind of little bit of color section. A really common problem folks have with their photographs is that the color seems off. You took it under some artificial light and it came out kind of green or orange. And there's a really nice way to correct that with what's called the white balance tool. And you can drag these yourself and make an image cooler, warmer, make the tint greener or more magenta. And really what you're trying to do is cancel out a tint. So if this looks a little bit cool, I would make it a little bit warmer. And if it looks a little bit green, I would make it a little bit magenta. But we don't have to sit there and guess. We can try using this eyedropper tool, which if you press W on the keyboard, it will switch to. So I'm going to press W. And you can see this eyedropper shows me this 100% zoom of what color it's going to sample. And it's saying, pick a target neutral. What that means is gray. So a neutral tone will have RGB numbers that are almost the same. So for example, green is not almost the same, right? And then black will be super low, but neutral gray, these are all in the low 60s. And if I click that, it gets me what Lightroom believes is the best white balance setting. So let's mess it up and see if it can fix it. W, click on the gray, and you can see it gets us to turn that neutral gray into an actual gray. And the reason we have white balance is because cameras perceive light differently than our eyes do, and the sun will emit a different temperature of light than the lights in our house, than the sun on a cloudy day, than in the shade. So this is a super useful tool. That's the white balance. And again, W on the keyboard and click on a gray part. Okay. The next part is the tone, which is what we would call brightness and contrast, but it's broken up into different segments. You can target the brightest parts, the darkest parts, the middle tones, and everything. The first two sliders are kind of our blunt objects. They just kind of do a very sweeping adjustment. Exposure describes how bright or dark the image is. Every single pixel is in the image. So if I take the exposure down, the picture gets darker. And if I take the exposure up, the picture gets brighter. And you might notice at the top this little mountain range. That's a really useful tool for knowing if your picture is too dark or not. That's called a histogram. Basically, there's this big gap between the brighter parts of my image where there are no pixels in that brightness. And then there's this huge peak here, which is describing this blown out sky here. So if I pull the exposure up, the foreground looks much better, but the sky will turn completely without detail, which is kind of something we deal with. And that's why you might want to shoot in RAW, which we'll talk about in a moment. So I like the picture pulling the exposure up, almost what we call a complete stop. Contrast describes the difference between the brightest and darkest parts. As you increase the contrast, it makes bright parts brighter and the dark parts darker. In my opinion, the contrast slider is a fine-tuning tool when you go and use your other sliders. So if we zoom in, it could be sharper, but that's okay. I also have highlights next, which this was a little bit cloudy, so the highlights are pretty soft anyway. But if we look on this seat and kind of on his hair, if I pull the highlights down, those parts get a little bit darker, not a whole lot. There's not a lot of highlights. It might be more the sky. You can see the sky comes out a little bit more, but we're not going to get those clouds back. They are gone. But highlights targets the brightest parts of the picture. Shadows will target the darkest parts, which will be like the tire and his overalls. And then whites and blacks are kind of the black and white point. So highlights and shadows can help bring detail out. Whites and blacks more adjust the brightness of those. So you can feel like not a lot happens when you move those. So those are also for fine tuning. So generally, if I edit a picture here in Tucson, I find I usually pull the exposure up a little bit, bring the highlights in to get some of his skin looking normal again. So it's about like that. And maybe I'll pull the exposure up a little bit more. So those are the tone tools. And generally, like I was saying, if you did a good job on your picture, you shouldn't have to go crazy. Let's look at this photograph here. So again, a big problem with a blown out sky, which we will address later on, but I can pull the exposure up and the front will look better. I can try and calm it down with some highlights. And that's kind of just some simple editing that you can do. And also these files have been compressed so that I could share them with you easily. So the quality is not what you might get from your originals too. Okay, let's talk about the presence section. And presence includes the strength of the colors. It also includes a little bit of what feels like sharpening. So texture is a relatively new one that will add contrast to the texture of the image, to the details. And what it does is it adds contrast to those middle tones. So if you pull the texture up as you do it, it will feel like the picture is getting a little bit sharper. Again, salt and pepper here. Clarity is a more sweeping one. I don't know why I noticed a trend where people like to pull the clarity down. It reminds me of going to the mall. Jill's asking an excellent question, which I can't quite go crazy with, but what about the brightness of your monitor when you're editing? When I edit, I work on a screen that has been calibrated. So I have this little spectrometer that reads the screen and gets me a properly calibrated screen for brightness and color temperature. But generally speaking, I turn the brightness up all the way and then back it off like a notch or two. That's what I do on my laptop. Because if your brightness is too low, you're going to end up making all your pictures overexposed as you edit. And if it's too high, you'll end up making kind of bland looking images because the monitor has made them look so rich. So calibration is a huge part of photography when you start to print. But the nice thing is most of what we do today is 4 screens. So if it looks good on your screen at a normal viewing brightness, it should look good on most other screens as well. That's a really good question though. If you want to, I think they make fairly inexpensive calibrators now, but that's more if you're starting to print as well. And inexpensive being, I think, like 40, 50 bucks. Okay, so clarity, it does it more extremely. It just increases the medium contrast of every pixel instead of more just details. And if you pull it down, you'll see your picture looks like you had mayonnaise on your lens or something. Just a note, if you make an adjustment and you want it back to 0, you can double click on the name of that adjustment. So texture, you'll see, does something similar, but more discreetly. I don't like it. So I'll bring that back up to this +9. And then we have dehaze, which is not going to be extremely useful here, but even then we do have a little bit of haze. This helps a lot with landscapes when the mountains feel like they've faded and started to disappear. Pulling dehaze up will add contrast to that kind of tonal range. And pulling it down will decrease. It'll make it look like you're shooting in fog, which is fine. So these first 3 kind of affect your sharpness. It's actually contrast, but you increase contrast, sharpness through adding contrast. And then these next 2, vibrance and saturation, control overall color strength. And a lot of us are probably familiar with saturation, where you pull it up and the colors get stronger. You pull it down and the colors get weaker to the point where it's a black and white image. But saturation is an okay tool in a little pieces, a lot of salt and pepper going on here. But you can see as you pull it up, it quickly might start to look a little strange. He starts to turn orange, and this red wall becomes really, really red. I feel like I'm in a McDonald's ad with the red and yellow now. So you want to be able to adjust colors subtly. You want to increase the presence of your image, but you don't want to turn people into lobsters. And that's where vibrance comes in, where vibrance will target colors that are usually not a skin tone. So it'll be blues and greens. So you can use vibrance to pull your color intensity up in a more subtle way that will hopefully not turn people into lobsters. And I'll go ahead and tell you guys another keyboard shortcut I really like. If you look below your delete key, there is a backslash key. I think it's backslash. If you press that while you're editing, it will show you where you were. That's your before view. You can see in the top right. And press it again, it'll show you your current view. So that's a nice way to be like, am I going too far with this or am I doing okay? There's also the compare button down here, just the two Ys, where it will show you them side by side. You've got a nice big screen. It will also overlay them and you can kind of compare what you've done. Pretty neat. So you can see how this is a little brighter, colors are richer, and it's even a little bit sharper. But I just like to do backslash. That's just something that I like. Okay, those are our basic image adjustment tools. Are there any questions about those so far?
Yeah, I was wondering like which one of those would be like really good to go ahead and bring out more brown tones.
More brown tones.
Yeah, to make it warmer.
Make it, I'm sorry?
Just to make it like look more warmer, like autonomous, you know, just kind of
Okay.
like.
Yeah, that's a great. So we want this picture to look more like it's fall, right? We went to the pumpkin patch and I want it to be warmer. That's actually going to be in the very first section. And you can add warmth here. And what you can do is pull that warmth up and then tone it down with the saturation. This is kind of a really trendy look right now. But there's actually other ways as well. If you scroll down to this color grading section, it's a little intimidating, but it's just 3 pies here that represent your middle contrast, your shadows, and your highlights. And you can say, I want my highlights to be more orange, and you can move them into the orange. I want the midtones to be blue or orange, right? And then the shadows, maybe I'll contrast with some of this. So this looks kind of like an old film photograph with that color grading, which is a little more of an advanced tool, but you can use that. And then you can say, got a little away from me, you can take the intensity down on certain colors. Does that kind of help?
Yeah, it's just editing photos like that is kind of hard sometimes because people like tend to get either like really yellow or like really red skin tones. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm wondering.
Yeah, definitely. That's a very common. Yeah. And you can, so I'm going to show you tools where you can go and target the skin tone as well. And you can also make a preset. Like when you go and make an edit that you know you're going to use over and over again, you can save it and just apply it with one button. So that's what this kind of stuff is why we use Lightroom Classic and not Lightroom CC, which I also really like. But that's also how you can pull back on that. So really terrific question. Play with color grading. The Lightroom is forgiving. It's non-destructive, and you can undo at any point. And actually, I think this is a good opportunity to say, hey, my client, my wife, she's the one that's making me do most of these photo shoots lately. Not that I didn't want to. She wants to know what it looks like with kind of autumn colors. She wants a black and white version, and she wants a neutral version. You don't have to go and make the edit and then export it and then undo it. You can use this really great function in Lightroom called a virtual copy, which just makes a copy of that picture in your catalog, but not on your computer. So it takes up basically 0 space. So if I right click on this picture, I can do create virtual copy. And now you'll see I have 2 versions of the same image. And I can reset the copy to where I started. And I can do a whole new edit if I want, or I can work off of the edit that I've already done and just say, oh, I want it to be square. Maybe something like that, I don't know. And I want to see what it looks like in black and white. So I'm going to change from color to black and white. And you can see it's actually sepia toned because it still has that color grading that I did. So I could go back down here, and this is actually a nice little trick. If you look at the edge of each panel, you can click on it to make it big and small, but it also has a little on-off switch where you can turn off color grading, so that because you're not sure you want it, you just turn it off instead of going and setting everything to 0. And then I can keep going with my exposure. And I actually like to use the tone curve down here, which we probably won't get into, but I suggest you play with it. It's just a way of making several adjustments at once using this curve along the histogram. And pull the highlights down. Maybe we'll make it sepia tone as well after all. It looks a little funky because I've got a bunch of different edits going on. But I have this old-timey looking picture, and then I have the other copy here. And at this point, I like to show you what the file looks like in its physical location, because all of the editing that we've done is only happening in Lightroom. Just think of it as a series of filters that we've placed on top of it. And if we go look at this file, I'm going to right-click, Show in Finder. So it's called blah, blah, blah 259. There it is, 259. If I open this, it's just the same old unedited picture. So that's what we call non-destructive editing. And there's only one copy of it. So we also have to do what's called an export. Before we export, I want to show you how we can take what we did to this picture and apply it to any other picture as well. So if I go from this one and I click on another image, if you look at the bottom of your adjustments, it says previous and reset. Previous means it will apply all the editing that I did from the last picture that I had selected. So if I click previous, it cropped it in, it rotated it, it color graded, it did the exposure, highlights, all that stuff with one click, which is pretty nice. But you can also click on an image, hold Shift, and select a whole row of images. So here I have 8 pictures selected. And as I work on one picture, because I have auto sync turned on here, if you click this, it turns it off. It will do the same edit to that whole row I have selected. So if I pull the exposure up, you'll see these ones all had their exposure go up as well. If I grab the white balance tool and click in the gray area, they will all have their white balance updated as well. This is a good tool for things for photographs that have the same exposure and color. But when your location changes, you don't want to be editing those two. And I don't like to do crops for auto sync because each picture has its own cropping situation. Questions about this little quick way to apply edits across multiple images? No problem if there aren't. And there will be time for questions soon. General questions. So let's say we really liked the autumn colors that we gave to this picture, and we're going to use it often. I'd probably pull the saturation down a little because it did make them a little orange. So let's just say this is an edit that I want to apply to a picture anytime I'm editing. I can go here to where it says presets, and you can see there are all these existing presets, which I really encourage you to explore. But you can also create your own by clicking the plus sign next to the word presets and create, and we call it autumnal. Boy, I hope I spelled that right. And you can say what you want it to actually do from the edits that you did. So I can check none and say just do the color grading. So it will only do the color grading that I did to it. And I can create it. So I can go to one of these and I can say, hey, make it autumn. And I click on that autumn. I can go to this one and make it autumn. So presets are really, really useful. And actually, the more you get into it, you can download presets that people make. Some people sell them, some people just make them. You might have noticed there was on the plus sign import, and you'll get a whole collection of presets that people use, kind of like filters in Instagram. An Instagram filter really is just a preset, except they have trendy names like Hoover and Paisley. I don't think I have the names right. Okay, so those are presets. The last two things I'd like to show you are the local adjustment tools and exporting. Because all we've done so far are what are called global adjustments, which change 100% of the pixels on the image. And now let's talk about making changes to specific parts of the image. Oh, that's cute. Okay, let's work on this picture. I'm going to work on the one that ends in raw and .dng because that's our full size one. And there's my boy. He's got a couple scratches. So the first thing I'll talk about is removing little spots, little bits of retouching. And my personal philosophy for retouching is I will remove things that a month from now would not be there. So, you know, boogers, scabs, stray hairs. Some people will ask you to do more than that, but that's it's not real. So next to the crop tool, we have this circle with an arrow, and that's called the spot removal tool. And the keyboard shortcut for that is Q, because it's meant to work quickly and in small bits. So Lightroom is about making really nice adjustments efficiently without opening and saving and making small retouching things. But if you need to do something a little more intense, like if I wanted to try and remove the person from the back of this picture, that's not really a Lightroom thing, that's a Photoshop thing. All right. So let's zoom in and click on him. I'm going to press Q on the keyboard. And the reason it's a circle with an arrow is because when you click once, it's going to shoot out in a certain direction and make a second circle. What that second circle represents is the pixels that it's copying and putting into the first circle that you made. So let's do this little point here. I'm going to use my mouse wheel to make it just big enough for that, and I'll click. And you'll see two circles. I can move this one around, and where I move it is where it pulls pixels from. So I probably want to put it somewhere near the nostril. And I can do this little scabby here too. Click. And it just pulled from there. And you can see when I'm on this tool, I can see all of my circles. If there's one I didn't like, I can click on it and press delete at any point. Now, this little scratch here, I probably don't want to make a huge circle because I'm removing more pixels than I need to. So you can also just paint with this tool. So again, I'm using the mouse wheel to make it smaller. And I'm going to click and drag across this little scratch there. And you can see it thought it should sample from the tip of his nose. That doesn't make sense to me. So I'll move it over here. And let's turn that off. I think I should have painted bigger. Let's click on that again. Feather, heel. So I'm going to delete it and use something a little bit bigger. Press Q. That's pretty good. So then I'll do this other little scratch here. And I probably won't do more than that. It looks like he's got some lunch under his lip, but generally speaking, if you're getting that close, you're probably looking at the eyes and hair more than the food under the mouth. That's the quick heal tool. And again, if you go to another picture and you press Q and you make it really big and you say, get rid of this guy, it's going to get weird fast. So I could maybe use this part of the wall try and line it up, but it just doesn't work. So subtle edits here, but I can zoom in, make it smaller with my mouse wheel. I'm holding spacebar to navigate. So this is a really good question. Is it directly sampling for the healing, or is it making new pixels? It is a direct sample, and you have two modes. You have heal, where it will grab and blend the sampled pixels. So here it's putting green pixels, but it tries to blend them. But it also has clone, which literally just copies pixels from one circle to the other. So if I wanted my son to have 3 eyes, I could put this in clone mode and grab an eyeball and put it here and feather the edge. That's what was wrong with some of my other ones. And now you've got 3 eyes, which we don't want.
Where did you grab the clone tool?
So it's the quick heal tool,
Okay,
and you just click clone instead of
Oh.
heal. But you usually want heal more than clone, because clone makes very obvious replacements and heal blends them in,
gotcha.
of course. Okay, now let's talk about, we're gonna skip over to the paintbrush tool. Yes, Brian, you would almost always, unless you've got like a piece of garbage that's like following a roof line that you really could just completely copy the pixels over, heal is 99% of the time what you want. And really, the weirder things get, it's just time to get into Photoshop, which is not what today's about. That being said, I get the majority of my editing done in Lightroom. I don't open Photoshop very often for photography work, unless I've been asked to do some compositing. All right, so we're going to skip to the end of these tools to this big brush looking tool, because it is a brush. It's called the adjustment brush. The keyboard shortcut is K, because A and B already do things. So if you press K on the keyboard, you'll be using the adjustment brush. And what this lets you do is paint any of these combinations of adjustments into a specific part of the picture. You're just going and painting and say, I want this part to be brighter. I want this part to be more saturated. And you can paint as many different brushes as you like. So I think one of my favorite ways to demonstrate it is, well, it might not work that great because he's a little backlit, so there's not a lot of the detail that you want. But if you look where it says effect under your brush, you see it says custom, where you can say, oh, paint with 0 saturation here. So if I paint with 0 saturation, anywhere I paint becomes black and white. I can make the brush bigger and smaller with my mouse wheel, or with the bracket keys on the keyboard. And if you look at my brush right now, it has a plus in the middle. But if I want to use it to erase parts where I painted too much, for example, maybe for some reason I want my baby to be black and white, but I don't want the red part. There we go, beautiful. And this might be more of a Photoshop thing, but that's okay. I can zoom in and I can hold Option or Alt on Windows, and it will turn into a minus button, and that will let me erase an adjustment brush part. It'll let me mask it out. That's what I'm doing. You can see it will be very difficult to do with the hair there, but that's the general idea of how it works. Now, if you look at this dot, that represents the brush I just painted with. If I hover, it'll show me what it's adjusting. On the right-hand side, I can continue to change what is happening in that part of the picture. So I can do things like sharpen it. I can do any adjustment that's in there whenever I want. It's not a one and done. You can go back and change it. But I'm going to click on that dot that represents that part I painted and just delete it, because we're going to go in and see if we can do a little bit to make the eyes a little richer, have a little more presence. So there's a preset where it says Effect and Custom. You can choose Iris Enhance. And you can see there's quite a few things here. I use Iris Enhance and Teeth Whitening the most, but even then, after I put them in there, I kind of tone them down. Teeth whitening I use because our teeth reflect the color around them. So a lot of times people will have blue teeth because of the sky or orange teeth because of the sunset. So that's a nice tool. But let's use Iris Enhance, and I'll scroll my mouse down to make the brush a little smaller. And what I actually like to do is just paint in the iris. And then I like to turn on the mask overlay, which is this red. It's kind of scary looking. So let's go ahead and give them 2 red eyes real quick. And it's pretty subtle with this particular picture because it's in diffused light. But I've painted on both the eyes, but I painted a little too much. So I like to check the show mask overlay. And this is a little more advanced, but I think it's fun to know. And then hold Option and erase where I painted too much. And then you can turn that back off if that's a little spooky looking. So what that did was it increased the exposure of the eyes by 1/3 of a stop. It increased the clarity to make them appear sharper. It added saturation, which it usually does too much. I usually do like 20. And that's what it did. It can do more stuff if I want. I can pull the exposure down or up. It's not a good look, so I'll lose that at 0. But now let's say I wanted to go and, am I on the raw file? I am. Let's say I wanted to try and bring the sky back. I could click New on my brush here. And I could paint along the sky, just like that. If I turn the mask on, you'll see it's red there because that's where I painted. And right now it's doing Iris Enhance, which is not great. So if you double click on the word effect, it puts it back to 0. But you can go and pull the exposure down and have some clouds show up if you want it, which is something that you can do with a raw file, but not with a JPEG. And then I'd hold Option and click and drag. But this is more to demonstrate that you can have multiple brushes. If you look at my image, there's a dot on his eye that represents the brush I used to enhance the irises. And there's a dot in the sky that represents the brush I used to change the sky. So I could, make it warmer or do anything like that. Questions about the brush? Oh, I don't want to delete that. I'll delete this one. Okay, the next one is the radial tool. If you press Shift and M, you get this circle tool that will draw an adjustment that fades from the center or to the center. It depends on whether you invert it or not. So if we look at this, if I hover, it's not red in the center and then it turns completely red on the outside. That means that the center is what's going to change and slowly fade out. So if I pull the exposure down, oh no, I had it backwards. Sorry, I thought it was a mask. So right now it's fading to the center. So once it hits the middle of the radial, it is doing 0 changes. So that's an easy way to add a vignette. And you can do as many of these as you like. And then the next tool is called the graduated filter, which is what I probably should have used for the sky. That keyboard shortcut is M. And you just click and drag and it makes a gradient. So if I hold on this, you can see it's full intensity at the beginning and it fades to 0% intensity. So red describes where the change is happening. So I could go and pull the exposure down of the sky and have it kind of fade once it hits the roof. So this is a common tool used for balancing 2 exposures with a horizon line. And the last one's the red eye tool. I don't have a picture with red eye, but you just grab that and draw a box over the whole. Oh, they changed it. Hold on. You draw from the center of the eye and get the whole eye in there, and it removes red eye if you have it, but I don't have it. Okay, the last step is exporting our pictures out. And then that's kind of our intro to Lightroom. You can go a lot deeper and do a lot, but the best thing you can do is play. So to actually get a finished image, because remember, this is all in Lightroom only, we need to export it out of Lightroom. And to do that, you can do it from anywhere. Let's go ahead and switch to library mode though. And let's select the pictures we want to export. So I'm going to click on this one. And if you hold Command or Control, you can select individual pictures that you would like to export out as a JPEG that you can share with anybody. And if you look in the bottom left, next to our import button is our export button. So import was how we brought in pictures to edit. Export is how we send out edited pictures. So you click export, and you can see there's a preset here, burn full-size JPEGs. That means it will save them as JPEG in the file format of JPEG at their full dimensions, which you can click that, and it will say, okay, full quality. And I actually don't know where it's going to save it to. That's interesting. But I prefer to just do it myself. So it's actually going to burn a CD. That doesn't happen anymore. I set it to export to hard drive. And this might look a little intimidating at first, but it's just a blown out save window. So the first part is, where is it going to export to? Where is it going to save them? I just choose specific folder to be safe. And then I'll choose where that specific folder is. So this will go into pictures, demo pictures, and I'll make a folder called full size JPEG. And then I'll click choose. So I can see here where it's going to save them. And I don't want a subfolder because I just made the folder. So I'll uncheck. Here you have the format. 9 times out of 10, you're going to want a JPEG. It's a universal image format. 100% quality is generally not needed. In fact, the pictures we're all looking at today were saved at 60%. So 75% is usually good enough for a finished image. So I'll choose 75. If you wanted to change the size, like say somebody said, hey, I need these no bigger than 1000 pixels, you can resize here. You can say the long edge is going to be 1000 pixels, or it's going to be 500 pixels, or anything like that. But I want to save them full size. And then you can do things like sharpening. You can embed information. You can put a watermark. You can tell it to do some presets. But really, we do location, settings, and sizing are the most common things. Okay, and then when I click export, it's going to save 5 pictures at the click of one button. And if you've ever used anything like Photoshop or similar, you would have had to open each one of these and go File, Save As, or Save a Copy, or Export, and then close it. So saving 5 pictures, that could have been 5 pictures, it could have been 500. It would have been the same number of clicks at the end of it, which is really nice. So now if we go look in my Finder or Explorer, in my Pictures folder, Demo Pictures, it made a folder called Full Size JPEG. And if I open it, there's the 5 pictures with the edits made to them. And it treats my virtual copies. Technically, these two are the same file, right? The same file number, but it saved them, exported them separately because I made a virtual copy. And that is the tour, the introduction to Lightroom from import to export. Hopefully this was helpful for you and gives you some inspiration to go edit and use tools to make life better. We have plenty of time for questions if you have any, or you can cherish your 10 minutes and go use them as you like. But thank you so much for being here.